What if you could read every single book in a library all at once? And I don't just mean read them, but actually understand the secret connections, the hidden stories that are woven between all of them. Well, that's kind of the promise of text mining. It's this incredible field where we're teaching computers to read and find patterns in these enormous amounts of text, patterns that honestly would be impossible for any human to spot. Today, we're going to dive into how this tech actually works and what it can reveal about our own history.
So, we're going to tackle a really fascinating question. Can we get a computer to pinpoint the exact moment American political language fundamentally shifted just by analyzing old presidential speeches? It sounds a little bit like science fiction, I know, but by turning words into data, we can uncover what is essentially a hidden fault line in history. So, first things first, how does a computer even begin to read? Well, the first step is to translate our language into something a machine can actually work with: numbers. It's all about turning messy, unstructured text into clean, structured data. And the foundation of this whole process is something called a term document matrix. Now, it sounds complicated, but just picture a giant spreadsheet. It's that simple. Every unique word and a collection of texts gets its own row. Every single document, say a speech or an article, gets its own column. And the number in each cell, that just tells you how many times a specific word appears in a specific document. This simple grid is the starting point for almost all advanced text analysis. Okay, so now all our texts are basically points of data in this massive, multi-dimensional space. The logical next step seems pretty simple, right? To see how similar two documents are, you just measure the distance between them. But, well, that common sense approach has a major, major flaw. See, the standard way to measure this is with something called Euclidean distance. It's that same as the crow flies straight line distance we all learned in geometry class. It's the most intuitive way for us to think about how far apart 2 points are. But in the world of text, that intuition can really lead us down the wrong path. And this is where the problem becomes crystal clear. Imagine you have 2 documents on the exact same topic. One is a short tweet, the other is a long 10-page article. To you and me, they're obviously similar, but to an algorithm using Euclidean distance, the long article's huge word counts make its data point seem incredibly far away from the tweets. The machine just gets confused by the length and completely misses the topic. So here's the crucial point. We just can't trust a method that's biased by something as simple as word count. A longer document isn't necessarily a different document, right? We need a much smarter way to measure similarity, one that isn't fooled by length. And that brings us to the breakthrough moment. What if, instead of measuring the straight line distance between our documents, we measured the angle between them? See, it's not about how far apart they are, it's about whether they're pointing in the same thematic direction. This is called Cosine Similarity. And what's so cool about it is that it completely ignores the magnitude or the length of the documents. All it cares about is the angle. So if 2 documents use the same words in similar proportions, the angle between them is going to be really small, and their cosine similarity will be high, which means, to the computer, they're topically similar. The research really puts it perfectly. With this method, our short tweet and our long article are now seen as highly similar because they both use words like economy and strong in similar proportions relative to their own length. The algorithm can finally see the topic, not just the word count. To put it as simply as possible, this technique lets us focus on what actually matters, the underlying theme of the text. It's a fundamental shift from measuring length to measuring meaning. Okay, so we've got a great way to compare documents. But what if we could take it a step further? What if we could not only group similar documents, but also group the words that define those documents, and do it all at the same time? Well, this is called co-clustering. The advanced algorithm that does this is called spherical double K means, or SDKM for short. The spherical part just means it's using our hero cosine similarity to measure angles, and the double K means part means it's simultaneously creating clusters of documents and clusters of words. So how does it actually work? Well, the algorithm is this really elegant loop. First, it groups documents that share a similar vocabulary. Then it flips around and groups the words that tend to appear together in those document clusters. And it just repeats this back and forth process over and over until the groups become stable, revealing the deep thematic structure of the entire collection of text. All right, so now that we understand the tool, let's see what it can do with a real-world example. Researchers applied this super powerful SDMM algorithm to a truly historic data set, every single U.S. presidential inaugural address. This analysis covered the entire span of the American presidency. We're talking from George Washington's very first address back in 1789 all the way up to Joe Biden's in 2021. So this isn't just some snapshot. It's a linguistic map of over 2 centuries of political history.
So what did the algorithm find? Well, the first major discovery was that all of the words used across 232 years of speeches could be neatly sorted into just 3 distinct thematic groups or clusters. These are basically the fundamental building blocks of presidential rhetoric. Let's take a look at these clusters. Cluster 1 is what the researchers dubbed the American dream. It's filled with these aspirational words like freedom, democracy, and peace. Then you have Cluster 2, law and order, which is all about the mechanics of governance, with words like constitution, state, and union. And finally, Cluster 3, politics and economics, deals with policy and legislation using words like Congress, business, and tariff. But here's the most stunning discovery. When the algorithm clustered the speeches themselves, it only found 2 groups, 2 distinct eras of presidential language. The first, from 1789 to 1861, was dominated by the language of law and order. The second, from 1865 all the way to the present day, is almost entirely defined by the language of the American dream. And the dividing line? The American Civil War. This plot right here shows that divide visually. It's amazing. Each dot is a presidential address. The blue dots are the early speeches, before the Civil War. The green dots are the modern ones. And look, there's almost no overlap at all. The algorithm, just by reading the text, found a fundamental shift in the very nature of American political discourse that happened right around 1865.
And we can see this exact same pattern in the words themselves. Just look at the bar chart for the modern era. That's the bottom half. It's just a sea of red, the color of that American dream word cluster. Now look at the early era on top. It's totally dominated by green, the law and order cluster. The language itself is what defines these 2 historical periods. Early presidents were building a government, modern presidents are defining a nation.
So, after looking at all this data, after peeling back all these layers of history with nothing but an algorithm, what's the one big takeaway here? The crucial point is this: by choosing the right mathematical tool, by looking at the direction of language instead of just its volume, we can actually make the text of the past tell their own story. We can uncover the hidden narratives and the fundamental shifts that define our history. So, we've used this incredible technique to map the evolution of presidential rhetoric. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other secrets are buried in the massive archives of text that are all around us, in old novels, in scientific papers, in social media posts, just waiting for the right questions and the right algorithm to finally bring them to light?